So welcome back, everyone. Next up is Sebastian Helzle. Last year, some of you might have been in the talk about HTMX, and a couple of you were just flowing the idea around what we can do in the Neos backend with that, and that's what Sebastian will tell us about if we did manage to bring it into a Neos backend and how. Welcome, Sebastian.
So welcome to my talk. We will be building better Neos backend modules with HTMX. Mostly it's about hyperlinks and how to make them even more hyper, or turning everything into a hyperlink. About me, it's always the same slide, but I want to say why I'm up here every day and why I come to the conference all the time and so on, and why I hang around in Neos for so long. Because half a year ago, in January almost, I had a call with my client, our weekly, where we discussed new Neos features and how I could implement his wishes and so on. And then while we were talking, we realized that the first commit to his Neos project was exactly 10 years before. He's my, I think, oldest client, or second to oldest, and for 10 years now, it's the same Neos project. We moved server one time, and we've been updating since Neos 2.1, I think, from back then. It's still fun to work with it. The code base is still good, and every time I work on it, they make it better, and it's always fun. If they want to have something implemented, I do it with joy. They enjoy the system, they love the system, and when people ask me what is great about Neos, is that I say, every time I work with Neos, it's fun, and that's why I spend so much time with Neos, and I'm in Slack and so on, and it's nice that projects can live so long, and that's also some value I want to transport to the clients and potential clients, that you can work with Neos for 10 years and it's still fun. You don't need relaunches and so on. So our agenda, what is HTMX? That will be a short one because that was already explained last year. The rocky road to the workspace UI, which was very rocky. How we made Neos HTMX ready. Some snippets of what we built, the benefits we gained from it, how to get started with a module nowadays, some next steps for the workspace UI and the Neos backend, and some remarks, and then we have a bit of time for questions, I hope. So what is HTMX? The website says it's the high-powered tools for HTML. It offers Ajax, CSS transitions, WebSockets, and so on, all via HTML attributes. What I say to it is it makes pages more fluffy. That's why we need it. And in most use cases, you don't need any custom JavaScript, or only tiny bits of it. So the idea is try to do it without any customizing if possible. It's a small library without dependencies. You put it in, you load it in your module. It's one file. You don't have a builds step. You don't need all those things like, you just put in the file. And because they don't update it so often, you also put it in and then it's fine, it just works. It's intended as a progressive enhancement. So the idea is that everything you build, you don't use it, then you add it, make it fluffy, and it should still work without for the people, especially who would have JavaScript disabled or accessibility, etc. But this is not a problem for the backend because without JavaScript you cannot log in, so we don't need to bother with that. But it's still good to keep in mind because it makes us more flexible. You should check out Dominic's talk from last year. If you want to know more, then I will now talk about, or you check out the website. But still an example from their homepage. When a user clicks on this button, issue an Ajax request to /clicked and replace the entire button with the HTML response. For that, we need a script, include, then have the button, tell it to post to /clicked, and then swap the content that we get into the outer HTML of the button. So the button is gone, and then we have the markup of the response. That's it. We could stop here, but I will explain a bit more. There are other highlights, boosting, so you can tell the page to turn every link and button into a hyperlink that will load the content via Ajax and then replaces the page, so it feels more quicker, the response, because it doesn't do a full reload. That's boosting. You can say wherever, you can also say only a part of the page is boosted. It has a history API, so you can decide if a link or a URL should be appended to the history of the browser. So if you press back, forward, and so on, if this link should be included in that or not. And you can also just modify the navigation bar. You have full control over that. There are some debugging tools that allow you to understand what's going wrong. We had that when we were developing the workspace UI, that some weird things happened and the debugging tool helped there. There are some core and community extensions which we didn't use. I looked through them. There was nothing we needed, but you can check them out. There are quite a bit. And there are really good examples and demos. Most of the time, we didn't need to check more than the reference, the documentation, and the examples. So no Stack Overflow searching and so on. That's usually not necessary. So the rocky road to the workspace UI. Every module is different. Here, like this house, you hopefully find all 5 differences. I think I didn't miscalculate. There are various kinds of backend modules. So they're Fluid-based ones, the oldies, the user module, the sites module, the configuration module. Then we have the Fusion-based ones, which you're probably not so aware of, like the login screen is Fusion-based. And history, which is most of the time disabled because it never really worked properly. Until hopefully soon it will be there freshly. And then we have some React-based ones with bits of Fusion and Fluid for the application wrapper. So the Neos UI, the Rectangular UI, the Media UI, etc., and the community plugins, of course, where I think there are also some Alpine and some maybe Angular. I'm not aware of that, but probably some other frameworks and templates that might be there. But what we need for the core is not more different variations, but less, because the focus is on maintainability. So we want minimal or 0 dependencies. Every dependency is a stone that we put in our way at some point in our future way that will fall over. So we don't want that. We want a low risk of regressions through updates or quirks those libraries have, or the complexity and their own bugs that they bring with them. And they should be easy to replace, because we don't know what happens to the library at some point, or the vendor, like React is pushed by Facebook or Meta, and whatever they will do, it will affect us in that case too. And when we build it in a way that we can easily replace it, we can use some other library, and the easier that is, for example, through those attributes, then we profit from that, because at some point we can just remove this bit of code, add something else, and it's good. It should be testable. We want extensibility, because we don't know what you might want to do with our modules, and we have ideas what we want to do in the future with our modules, but we don't fully yet know what we want to or how we will do it. So both of these cases need to be there, and plugins must be able to add their own functionality to the modules, which simply doesn't work with most of the React modules. It should be readable, because that would make it easier for you to contribute if you actually understand what we're doing there, and you don't need to parse 8, 10, or 10 files or build steps and so on to be able to add your own little functionality or a bug fix or just improve the code a bit. Usability is important. It should be, we want quick interactions, we want low loading times, it should be intuitive, and it should have common components, so not that every module looks a bit different. Our target is that you feel at home no matter what module you use. So the first implementation, I don't know if it's really the first one, but when I joined the project, it was Fluid and jQuery. I don't know if there was one before. And nobody wanted to work on it, really. I don't know. I think since Neos 2, probably, it looked like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but and we rarely had any improvements to the module, or we had few bug fixes and improvements, and it was just living there, biding its time. So we had regressions often, because, for example, in the reviews screen, you have the jQuery, and then you fold the differences in the workspace, the changes, and then it wasn't work properly, and so on. We had performance issues when you had many workspaces, and performance issues if you had many changes. For example, if you have 2,000 changes, the modules get in a bit slow. And it was hard to extend because you had to fully replace the fluid templates to do anything, and then it wouldn't properly work with updates anymore. jQuery is more or less deprecated because the browser can do almost everything it offered back then. And we consider fluid deprecated for the core. Not for your packages, you can still use it, but we don't want to add new ones, only remove. The second implementation was Fusion and React. Nobody except me wanted to work on it. I implemented it for the plugin as a plugin for a customer. And because they had those performance issues especially and usability issues, they just needed more information. Who created it? When was it modified? What was it about? What kind of workspace is it? And also old workspaces should be shown that they are a bit old and probably not used anymore. And the changes are loaded asynchronously, and it should load quickly, and you can edit it in dialogues instead of separate pages, all those things. The review process I didn't touch so much. Yeah, that was mostly about it. And I made it with React because I implemented most modules with React, although I always hated. So, large library, React. Few contributions, people don't really like to touch it, even though there are so many React developers in the world. I don't know. There are few shared components. I use the React UI components from the Neos UI, but they all have quirks. They are not always easy to use, and yeah. And it's a high maintenance JS build. Usually every few months all those builds break because that's how software works. It's not fun. I spend so much time in all those React modules just to keep it possible to build them, and that's it's really weird. Hard to extend and customize. It simply barely was possible to extend it because every time you have a React app, you have to implement your own way of extensibility, and that's also there's no common way. It seems nobody has this problem. The Neos UI solves it, but that's like a big part of code that you would have to ship with every module to achieve something similar. So we decided last year after Dominic's talk, hey, that's interesting. Maybe there's this easier way to build a module. So we did some prototyping, and I said, yes, we want to bring my plugin into the core, but we don't want to ship all this React because we simply can also not decide how we share all those React parts and components between all those modules, because it doesn't make sense that our 10 modules or what we have all have their own React stack, etc. So we want to bring it in. I wanted to try HTMX. I get help by 6 people. That was really cool. Thank you all who helped me with that. And we took all the basic concepts from my plugin. We tried to do it very similar, that it also feels similar because the people who used it liked it. So you have also this changes counts, you have the nesting for deeper nested workspaces, and the description, the status. Some things are still missing. They are work in progress, like the last change date and so on. And that you can, I will show that on the next page. You have now the dialogues, native browser dialogues, no JavaScript. The JavaScript only opens those dialogues. HTMX takes care that the content of the dialogue is loaded asynchronously. So we always have dialogues that match the context, and we can give useful information on the buttons and in the text. And here you have the visibility settings. Here we didn't fully implement all the new ACL system from Neos 9 yet. It's a branch where we soon, hopefully with Neos 9.1 or 9.2, allow you to really say for every workspace what group, what role, what user is allowed to work on that workspace in what way. Only read access, read and write, etc. This is still, yeah. The review process is mostly the same still, like the old one without jQuery. It's just implemented natively now. It had some optimization, some improvements, but that's something we want to improve in the future with your help, hopefully. Why did we choose it? Fusion has great extensibility. So all the rendering is done with Fusion. We use Fusion every day. Everyone who creates any kind of component or backend module has something to do with Fusion, so we know how to do it. We can share Fusion components between modules. and adds as HTMX as a spice on top of it to sprinkle it with all the sparkly sprinkles. So most of the time we try to implement a feature without HTMX to make it work, except the dialogues, and then add the attributes. Can also be done by different people. That also, when we implemented it for 9.0, the module, that helped us because some people, they just wanted to implement the functionality, and later then some other person just made it fluffy again. So to make all that work, we had to adjust Neos a tiny bit so it's HTMX ready. The first thing was to add Flash messages support, that HTMX can handle them. For that, we needed a specific HTTP header Flash message storage that is activated as soon as a HTMX request to the backend is triggered. It detects the header, and then it stores Flash messages in the header instead of the markup or somewhere else. That was very useful. I will show later how then we use those headers. We needed to forward those headers between in the controller when we go from action to action, because sometimes we have an error or we want to lead back to the index, and then the index should also show a Flash message from before. So there was a tiny bug fix necessary. And to show Flash messages, we needed custom JavaScript in the client now, but not a lot. HTMX has an event system. They have lots of events that you can add callbacks to. For example, after the request, we check if our response has Flash messages. Let's say messages. If not, then fine. And if we have some, we call the backend API and tell it to show those Flash messages. And then it's fine. Same for errors or similar. If we get an error response, we check for messages. If there are messages, we don't have to do anything because the other handler already took care of it. And if we have none, we show a custom message that shows the error message because maybe it was not an error from the backend, but from the web server or something else. But that's all our JavaScript now. We're done. So, some snippets. Navigation and browser history. When you For example, here we have our component. It has various attributes. We first get, we tell it to get, when you click on it, the index URI. When we click it, we also replace the URL in the navigation bar with this URI, and then we push the URI to the navigation history stack. Those two can be merged, I think. The documentation is not 100% clear on that. But I think I will soon adjust this code. But here for showing it, it was helpful, so I left it like it is. And then we have the select and the target. The select and the target are meant to tell HTMX to take that piece from the response and where to put it in our current markup. And then we, at the end, with the swap, we say replace the outer HTML of the element that we currently have. You can also target something else. The attributes can grow. That's something I don't like so much about it. There we have to still find some better way to do it, maybe. For example, you have a button that submits a form. First we tell the form, the name of the form, then we name of the action, then the value of the action, then we want to say we submit it, and then the target is that we later want to update the table after we submit it. Then we want to include the form fields, and we want to swap again. And then after the request, we have a bit of inline JavaScript that tells the browser to close the current dialog we have open, because it's about, I didn't say that, it's the publishing dialog. Yeah. And then at the end, we also say we post to the publish changes endpoint. This is a bit hard to explain to people when you say, oh, here, see, that's what it does. That's one point I don't like so much about HTMX. I hope we find a better way, but I don't want to implement our own API for HTMX. So like putting all those attributes into props of the button, then we would need to implement all the HTMX attributes as props. That also doesn't make sense. So if somebody has a nice idea how to make this more readable, human readable, that would be really nice. I'm not exactly sure yet how to do it. I also didn't find any better example yet. There is attribute inheritance and globals, so you can start with the globals. In Fusion, we render some custom components. First, we have the HTMX config. That's just JSON that HTMX will look for in the markup, and it tells HTMX there we have some configuration regarding how to handle errors and some other global configuration we need. We have a Flash message container that is required by the backend API. We have a global indicator. That's the orange bar that will animate at the top of the module. And then we have the content section, and there we have our global attribute. For the indicator, we tell HTMX and all links that are in this content section to use that indicator that we have. As soon as they request something, the indicator should be shown. Afterwards, it should be hidden again. We have enabled the boosting, so all our links are asynchronously. The attribute inheritance works on every level, so you can also enable boosting, and then at some point lower in the markup, you all can also disable it again. We have render cases. We had a lot of them in the beginning, and then after some iterations, we cleaned it up and didn't need so many anymore. So for example, if we want to render call the dialog action, the delete action, if we make a get request, we get the content of the dialog. Request the fragment that renders the content of the dialog, and if we make a post request, we don't need to render anything because we only get the header back that tells us okay or error or something like that. You can make that more elaborate if you have server-side validation and then send a response with the markup for the validation content. But that's a possibility how to do it. I think in most cases you don't really need it. You can automatically tell HTMX, or you can tell HTMX to automatically swap parts. For example, if we have a component that's always there, in this case it's the workspace count at the lower left of the module, every time it spots this counter in the rendered response from the server, it will automatically replace that count. So when you delete a workspace or you add a workspace, this count in the lower left, we just send it as a fragment in the response, and HTMX knows that to put it there to update our little corner with the count. That's very helpful. So what did we gain from it? User experience. Interactions are much quicker. Dialogues are more contextual because we can give them all the properties, the attributes that are required for this, and then we can write text or the button labels, the descriptions and so on match what you are currently doing. We have minimal loading times because the JavaScript is very small. We have barely any custom JavaScript, and most of the time we render small fragments. We are Fusion first, so everyone knows how to modify Fusion. When features are implemented, we can later make them fluffy, as I explained before. We have the context-sensitive dialogues. JavaScript is second place. We rarely need to touch it because we only have those two event handlers. That's basically it, and a bit of inline script. There's not so much else to do in, I guess, most use cases like that. We have no JS artifacts. We are independent in most ways. The controller has absolutely no knowledge of HTMX. So we could also use probably Alpine or whatever other JavaScript library can do something similar, and it would just work. We need maybe a different message storage, and have different header names, but beside that, the controller doesn't really care about what we do in the front end. This shouldn't be there. We can focus on what we want to achieve and not focus on how we even build our JavaScript. That's really nice. So how can you get started with a HTMX module? Decide what you want to achieve first before you implement anything. Does the user benefit from whatever you want to use? That's the biggest question. So does your team benefit from the library that you like currently a lot? Do the others even want to work with it? Does your future self benefit? My past self sometimes didn't like what my then past self decided, and my past future self is still happy about the HTMX decision when I need to fix a bug there. And no JavaScript is perfectly fine. It works. With modern browser technology, it's really cool, and CSS, like we learned also yesterday. When you decide on the technology, React is still a good choice for things like the media UI, and if you have super complex state handling, there I think it makes sense to have some kind of helper library, or if you only need state handling, you can also use something else. If you don't need a rendering part, there are good reasons to still use that. The HTMX documentation examples are really good in my perspective, and I think the community is also very responsive if something is weird. And what I really like when as a preparation for this talk, I checked the changelogs of the last HTMX releases. There was barely any code change in there. It was documentation update, documentation update, documentation update. And that's really cool. You can check out existing modules like the workspace UI now in Neos 9. It's probably not the best HTMX implementation in the world, but that was our first one. So that's the start. And there's also my orphanage plugin for Neos 8. If you lose some child nodes somewhere, you can bring them back. It was my very first experiment on HTMX. It's a bit less code, so maybe also a good example to check out. In Neos 9, this will not be necessary anymore because we don't create orphans anymore. But Neos 8 is still a bit mean. Next steps, plans for the workspace UI. We want to use HTMX for the review process, to speed up your work, to load changes as fragments. So when you have, the idea is to have something like a tree view and it doesn't load all the changes, 1,000 changes when you load it, but you can say what you need, and then it opens, and then it loads what you needed and updates what you need, and so on. So it's really fast to work with it, and you have a better overview. To simplify the HTMX attributes, to prevent this growth of attributes and to make them readable, finish the ACL editor, and for that we need help. Surprise. So if you're interested in any of that, or especially for the improving the review process, that's not only just refactoring, that's really what could be the good concept to review content. We don't want Git, we don't want something complicated there. It must be possible to get a good understanding of what you're actually publishing to your live workspace or shared workspace, whatever, to make that good. And to have image comparison and all of that, nice things. We have plans for other modules. We use HTMX for core modules like the user management and the account management. For the user management, it would be nice that it doesn't reload the whole thing when you delete a user. When you, for example, have 500 users, there could be a lot of things improved with sorting and filtering and so on. Would also be a nice test to implement things like that. There are also examples on the documentation for filtering, for example. And the account management is very cumbersome in Neos because it shows you a lot of things that you don't care about, because mostly you change your password, and that's a lot of clicks. Would be nice if that is easier. And we want to start a Neos component library for backend modules. Bastian Weidelich already created a plugin that does something like that, and he uses it in projects, but we need something similar for the core. And there it would be also great if somebody steps forward and tries to push it a bit and find out what we actually need and stops too long discussions about that because everybody wants a different component, and find a stripped down version that can already cover a lot because everyone would benefit. And if we want to, in the future, have liquid glass interface for Neos, then it's helpful if all the components are shared and have a common theming to look glassy. Again, help, please. It's much easier now. HTMX is quite boring, and that's the good part. It's really approachable. Some remarks. Why not Alpine.js? Alpine.js does a lot of more things. It's also about logic. You can do looping and rendering and stuff like that. We don't want that because it's harder to replace once it's in there. And it's nice. I also used it very successfully in one project was in the front end, that's fine, but here we don't want it. It's also too much baggage. We want server-side rendering. We want to minimize inline scripting. Yeah. Would I rewrite the node types analyzer from React to HTMX? You learned yesterday about it from Sandstorm while they updated it here for Neos 9 live, basically. Thanks Sandstorm for that, because then afterwards I took this pull request and finished it up, and it's now Neos 9 ready. I would rewrite it to HTMX if I have at some point too much time, because here you have a unidirectional interface. You select something on the left, you filter it there, the left updates the center updates the right bar, sidebar, or itself. So that works really well with HTMX, because you just tell it, replace this part. You don't have so many changes like a selection on the right. We don't have a write process, we only read. On the left, I still use the Neos UI node tree. That would be interesting to replace, but that would be also a great component that we use for backend modules, because there are a lot of trees in various backend modules, so it's a challenge for someone who wants to do it. That would be much easier. I wouldn't use React there anymore. And the center is anyway some different script for the rendering of the graph, so that should be fine. Would I rewrite the media UI to HTMX? No. There's so much going on. I use 3 ways of managing state and various other things, and there's so many updates when you change something and select something and filter and so on. For that, React is fine, even though it's a pain to update dependencies and keep just the builds running and the tests running. I recently spent 2 days just to get the tests running again on GitHub Actions. They run again, I have more tests and so on. That's fine, but it's not so much fun to keep it running, but I'm fine with implementing it. The code base is also good. It's not hard to add new features there, but yeah. So that's what I wanted to say about HTMX. It's a boring thing. It's mostly about making hyperlinks more hyper. Try it out, test it, use it in your modules. Take our examples, give feedback, improve our code too, make some pull requests, create some issues if you find them. And now some advertisement, because I can be your Neos anti-aging moisturizer. I can make your Neos projects faster. I can make your editors happier. I can make your developers better, implement plugins, and I can improve the Neos core for you and everyone else. So if you need my help for your Neos projects, please get in touch. Soon I have a bit more time available, and I would love to share my passion for Neos with you and give you a better experience with it. So, questions time. Also love to hear from you afterwards, and you can join the Neos Workspace module chat Slack.
Thank you, Sebastian. So it's so nice of you that you already answered some follow-up questions. But you said you need help, especially to develop the workspace UI further or to replace other modules. Would it be a good starting point for tomorrow's contribution day?
Yes.
To get up and running?
If one of you wants to work on one of those modules, for example, a user module is very friendly to do that, I can help you. Would love to.
So you are welcome if you're staying until tomorrow, travel, I don't know, about midday. You can start with us at 9 a.m. and we can set you up so you can maybe work on the train or something like that afterwards. And we have also a present for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now, following up on this stage, is Daniel with the talk about Code Smarter, Not Harder, how AI coding tools boost your productivity. And the lightning talks will take place on the studio stage. So see you soon.